The lake behind my house was my sanctuary until the HOA poisoned it to stop me from fishing. They thought they could control me, choke my freedom with their petty rules. I can still see the fish floating, lifeless under the moonlight, the water shimmering with their toxic secret. But they didn't know one thing. That lake wasn't just mine. It fed their pristine community, their manicured lives. When I discovered their mistake, the tables turned in a way they never saw coming. What happens when an HOA's power trip poisons more than just a lake? Stick around, you won't believe how this unfolds. I'd always dreamed of a quiet life by the water. My small cabin sat on the edge of Willow Lake, a hidden gem in our gated community, where dragonflies danced and the sunset painted the water gold. I'm a retired teacher, living alone, finding peace in fishing every evening, rod in hand, worries gone. The neighborhood was picture perfect. Manicured lawns, friendly waves, and the HOA's promise of order. But their rules felt like a tightening leash. They'd nitpick mailbox colors or grass height, and I'd nod along, keeping the peace. Then I noticed their eyes on my lake, their whispers about community standards. Something was brewing, and it wasn't just the summer heat. The first sign of trouble came with a letter, crisp and official, tucked in my mailbox like a venomous snake. The HOA declared my fishing in Willow Lake a violation of community aesthetics. No fishing poles allowed, too unsightly for their pristine vision. I laughed it off at first. I'd been casting lines for months, pulling base from the glassy water without a whisper of complaint. But the letters kept coming, each one sharper, demanding I stop or face fines. I ignored them, thinking they'd tire out. They didn't. Soon a $200 fine appeared on my doorstep, then another, stacking up like kindling for my growing anger. I wasn't just fishing, I was claiming the one thing that kept me grounded. The HOA wasn't faceless. It was led by Margaret, a woman with a smile like a cracked porcelain mask, her clipboard always at the ready. She'd patrol the neighborhood, her heels clicking like a metronome, eyeing my cabin as if it offended her personally. One evening I caught her staring at the lake from my yard, her lips pursed. "This is a shared resource," she said, her voice dripping with authority. Shared? I'd never seen her near the water. But her words lingered, heavy with intent. Days later I noticed the fish weren't biting. The lake, once alive with ripples, felt eerily still. I chalked it up to weather, but a sour smell crept into the air, faint at first, like decay. Then came the morning I found them. Dozens of fish, bellies up, floating like grim confetti across the lake's surface. My stomach churned. This wasn't nature's doing. I waded in, the water cold against my shins, and saw a faint chemical sheen glinting under the dawn. The HOA had poisoned my lake, I was sure of it, to choke me out of my ritual. I stormed to their office, heart pounding, demanding answers. Margaret met me with that same brittle smile. "No proof," she said, shrugging. But her eyes flickered, betraying something darker. I wasn't imagining this. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I started digging. Late nights poring over community bylaws, I found their rules were flimsy, more about control than fairness. The lake wasn't just mine. It supplied half the neighborhood's water, filtered through a system no one talked about. If it was poisoned, their pristine faucets might be next. I confronted Margaret again, this time with a water sample I'd taken, cloudy and reeking. She dismissed me, but her hands trembled as she shuffled papers. The fines kept coming, now $500, as if they could bury me in debt. Neighbors started whispering, some sympathetic, others parroting the HOA's line about standards. I felt eyes on me everywhere. My cabin no longer a sanctuary, but a target. Then I saw it. A truck parked near the lake at midnight, its logo barely visible, a local chemical company. My pulse raced. I snapped photos, hands shaking, knowing I'd caught them. But what could I do with proof when the HOA held all the power? Margaret's next move was bolder, a notice threatening to seize my property for non-compliance. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about fishing anymore, it was war. The HOA thought they'd crushed me, but they didn't know I'd been building a case. Armed with photos of the chemical truck and my toxic water sample, I called an emergency community meeting. The clubhouse buzzed with curious neighbors, their whispers like static as I stepped to the podium. Margaret sat in the front row, her smile tighter than ever, eyes daring me to fail. My heart thundered, but I held up the murky sample jar, its stench cutting through the room. "This," I said, voice steady, "is what the HOA poured into Willow Lake to stop my fishing, the same lake that feeds your taps." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I projected the truck photos, time-stamped, undeniable. Margaret's face drained of color as I revealed the kicker. Lab results confirming the lake's contamination with a pesticide banned for residential use. The HOA hadn't just poisoned my sanctuary. They'd tainted the community's water supply. A neighbor shouted, "Is this why my kids got sick?" The room erupted, fury replacing apathy. Margaret stammered, claiming ignorance, but I wasn't done. I'd filed a report with the State Environmental Agency, and their investigation was already underway. Fines, lawsuits, maybe even jail time loomed for the board. She lunged to the microphone, accusing me of slander, but the crowd wasn't hers anymore. A woman I barely knew stood, her voice shaking, revealing Margaret had bullied her over her garden. Others joined, their stories of petty fines and threats pouring out. The HOA's iron grip shattered in minutes. Margaret fled the room, her clipboard forgotten, as neighbors demanded answers. I felt a surge of vindication, my cabin's peace within reach. The state's investigation hit the HOA like a tidal wave. Within weeks, Margaret and 2 board members resigned, their names tarnished by fines and a scathing public report. The lake's pesticide levels were deemed hazardous, forcing the HOA to fund a costly cleanup, $50,000 drained from their budget. My fines were dropped and fishing was quietly permitted again. I returned to Willow Lake, rod in hand, watching the water slowly heal, though the scars lingered. Neighbors, once silent, now nodded warmly, some even joining me to fish. The community rewrote the bylaws, curbing the HOA's overreach, a small victory born from chaos. But the ripple effects ran deeper. The story spread online, my photos and lab results fueling local news and Reddit threads. People shared their own HOA horror stories, turning our fight into a rallying cry against petty tyrants. I realized this wasn't just about my lake. It was about standing up when power feels absolute. Margaret moved away, her reputation in tatters, while I stayed, my cabin a quiet defiance. The lake's fish are fewer now, but each catch feels like a reclaiming of freedom. What happens when you push back against those who think they own you? Sometimes you don't just save your corner of the world, you inspire others to fight for theirs. So tell me in the comments, have you ever faced an HOA's wrath? Let's keep this fire burning.